officially 2024, which means it's time for me to get some top 10 and bottom 10 lists out. Starting with... Hi everybody, Anthony here from Awesome Anthony Productions, and today I'm going to give you my bottom 10 worst movies of 2023. But before we get started, you know exactly what to do at the end of the video. If I've earned it, please leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss any of my new content. Now let's get into it. By the way, spoiler warning for all of these movies. If a movie comes up that you don't want to be spoiled on, just skip it. Number 10 on my worst movies of 2023 list. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. A disappointing mess of awful CGI, bad characters, and very cringeworthy dialogue that wastes one of the coolest and well-acted villains that the MCU has seen in making him an Ant-Man villain that literally gets taken down by ants. Add to that the fact that our main character is a straight white male, which in the current year is a horrible thing to be according to Hollywood. He gets put down and shown up by his daughter throughout the entire movie. This whole thing just left a bad taste in my mouth and honestly made me think that I was done with the MCU until Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Loki Season 2 came out, which were both just fantastic. Number 9, Suitable Flesh. Where do I begin with this piece of shit? 80s schlock with none of the self-awareness that would have made it fun to watch. It's just bad acting, bad writing, and an awful score with plenty of over-the-top sex, blood, and gore, even though none of that really helps it much. Nothing really worked here, from the writing to the performances to the blood and gore itself, and I was laughing throughout the movie at the most inappropriate times. I'm actually somebody who likes Heather Graham, but I will admit that she's better in a co-lead role and cannot carry an entire movie on her own, because wow, did this movie prove that. Number 8, Enus Men. I was actually really excited for this when I saw the vintage look of it in the trailers and thought that I was going in for something that was more like a new take on The Wicker Man. But nope, this is pretentious, overlong drivel with no semblance of story that is really only redeemable when you look at the cinematography combined with the vintage feel of the whole thing. But putting that aside, this movie is just a tease. You'll spend the entire movie waiting for something scary to happen and it just never does. Instead, we just see the main character do the same thing over and over and over with pretty much zero payoff. Number 7, Perpetrator. One of the least cohesive, poorly written, and badly acted horror movies I've seen in a very long time. The plot doesn't make a lick of sense until 2/3 of the way into the film. The killer is telegraphed very early on in the movie, and the lead actress and Alicia Silverstone are just laughably bad. The only thing this movie really has going for it is strong production values and cinematography. Overall though, it's weird, confusing, and just poorly put together. And it commits the worst sin for a horror movie. It's boring. Number 6, The Outwaters. Yes, another horror movie on this list. A found footage horror movie that literally goes out of its way to not show you anything, making it an incredibly frustrating experience for 3/4 of the movie, especially during a 10 to 15 minute sequence that's supposed to be the climax, when literally you only see anything through a tiny little pinhole. And by the time anything is shown to you in the last part of this movie, regardless of how interesting it might look, there's nothing behind it. It's just weirdness for weirdness sake, which they dubbed cosmic horror to relieve themselves of any sins of the movie. Number 5, and I cannot wait to hear the hate I'm going to get for this one, Barbie. Though I can admit that I appreciated the production design, Ryan Gosling's performance, and some of the humor, the fact that this movie baited everyone into thinking that it was going to be a fun, self-aware adventure based on the character of Barbie only to rip the rug out from underneath you within the first 25 minutes of the movie and turn it into a movie that bashes you over the head over and over again with the same one-note message of men bad is enough for this movie to make it on this list. So many people have told me that I misunderstood the plot of this movie and that it was trying to show that both sides, patriarchy and matriarchy, are bad, but that doesn't change the fact that this movie makes every single woman character a symbol of martyrdom and makes every single male character either an idiot, a misogynist, or both to build up the Barbies and women characters. Even the ending, which so many people point to as evidence of the movie condemning both sides, shoots this argument right in the foot, which literally amounts to, well, Kens, you have no power now, but we'll give you a little taste of it with the possibility of more to come so that you can get what it really feels like to be a woman. Of course. It's just more of the typical divisive, politicized bullshit that Hollywood pushes down your throat nowadays. And if it weren't for Ryan Gosling, this movie would be so much higher on the list. I know he's not supposed to be the hero, but to me, he definitely was. I am not surprised that critics and journalists love this movie as much as they did. Number 4, another one that probably is going to be a little controversial, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. As safe as an adventure movie as you can get, crossing off the typical Indiana Jones movie beats with a MacGuffin, a bland villain that never really does anything very scary, a third act twist that feels like a total last minute change, as does that super rushed and disrespectful ending, and the most insufferable character of the entire series in Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who spends the movie putting Indy down for being old and out of touch, while doing most of the shit that he should be doing in his own movie outside of maybe 1 or 2 scenes. Add some surface level nostalgia with a couple of cameos and lazy callbacks, and this movie just left left me feeling sad when I left the theater. Number 3, The Exorcist Believer. What a total disappointment. I should have expected it to be that way when I saw that David Gordon Green, the man that tricked everybody with a great start to his Halloween trilogy and a hard drop in quality for the second and a total bait and switch with the third, was behind it. But this is a movie with hardly any effective scares that brings back a well-known legacy character just to stab out her eyes and remove her from the movie after like 15 minutes, along with the fact that this movie hits nearly every bland horror cliche and has a complete shit show of an exorcism scene with way too much going on. Combine that with half-assed callbacks to the original that just serve to remind you how much of a disappointment this is compared to that masterpiece, and this was really just an awful disappointment. Number 2, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. The Mean One, another bland, cheap horror movie based on a popular children's character, was one of the worst movies that I saw in 2022, but I really did think that this had the opportunity to outdo it in every sense of the word. It doesn't really, though, although this movie does bring in some practical kills and gore effects that look pretty good, especially compared to the PS2 CGI quality blood that The Mean One had. Besides that, this movie is ugly, cheap, and filled with awful acting that is on a middle school drama club level. Not to mention how absolutely gross and ineffective the masks are for the Winnie the Pooh characters. You can tell 100% that they're rubber, and you can see the seams constantly lifting up, revealing the actor's skin underneath. So yeah, it was pretty terrible, but to be honest, I can't wait to see a sequel just to see how much worse it can get. And number 1, my worst movie of 2023. It's a Disney remake. Any guesses? Nope, it's not The Little Mermaid, it's Peter Pan and Wendy. I expected The Little Mermaid to be the worst Disney remake of the year, but I was pleasantly surprised that movie ended up being more mid instead of just awful. Peter Pan and Wendy, however, is awful. A complete bastardization of the original story that completely misses the point of the original, throwing away all the nuance and whimsy to deliver heavy-handed messaging and push the main character Peter aside to make Wendy, Tiger Lily, and Tinkerbell the main girl boss characters. In several scenes, Wendy single-handedly fights off several grown pirates all by herself, while giving Captain Hook a way too convoluted backstory to make him a sympathetic character. Peter's more of a villain here than he is, and that's without even mentioning the fact that the cinematography and color grading here are just drab and boring. I lost whatever goodwill I had toward this movie when Wendy's happy thoughts scene to make herself fly on her own is a montage of her imagining a whole life where she grows up with no family, just being a successful businesswoman, pilot, and writer until she dies old and alone. This movie is just a slap in the face to the original and any fans of it, and I figured that was going to be the case when they announced it was going straight to Disney+. Got a few dishonorable mentions here too. Insidious: The Red Door. I mentioned in my review that movie was basically a more boring retread of what we've seen before. The Flash. It has some cool things here and there and some good themes, but it's just a mess of awful CGI with a criminal in the lead actor. Sick, it was okay, but it was more of just a bland kind of knockoff of Scream, even though it was written by the same guy, that forces way too much COVID-19 stuff into it. Aquaman 2, that movie was just a total shit show, as was Children of the Corn, the new remake. That movie had nothing special going for it. The Pope's Exorcist was a completely ridiculous horror movie that is unintentionally funny through about 90% of the runtime. And Rebel Moon Part 1, which is another Zack Snyder movie that I'm sure has a better director's cut, because this one is just cut to shit with boring characters, bad writing, and mostly mid CGI. And that's my bottom 10 worst movies of 2023. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, you know what to do. I said it earlier. Please leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss any of my new content. While you're at it, you can scroll in the description, find the links to my socials, leave a comment, let me know what you thought of my list, or if you liked any of these movies or agreed with any of the picks that I had. And lastly, if you want more of my content, you can click or tap on these cards right here. I'll take you to my last review of Poor Things, or just over to my channel where you can check out my reviews, my shorts, and my old shit. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time for my top 10 best movies of 2023.